It all started on a quiet, sunny morning in the suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, the kind of place where everyone waves hello, kids ride bikes down the street, and life seems to move at a slower, more peaceful pace. But for the new homeowner, Zara, that peace was about to be shattered by one person, Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA rules. From the very first day, Karen made it her mission to make Sarah's life a living nightmare. It began with a knock on the door. There she stood, clipboard in hand, a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "I just wanted to remind you about our HOA guidelines. We take them very seriously here." And so, the barrage of violations began. The grass was half an inch too long. The trash bins were 5 minutes late being brought back in. The mailbox was too modern and didn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Each violation notice came with a sternly worded letter signed by Karen herself. Sarah tried to comply, but no matter what she did, it was never enough. Karen was always watching, always waiting, ready to pounce on the tiniest infraction. Then came the day Karen crossed the line. Sarah was washing her car in her own driveway, a completely normal activity, or so she thought, but Karen saw it differently. She called the police, claiming Sarah was conducting unauthorized construction on her property. When the officers arrived, they were visibly confused. "Ma'am, this is just a car wash," one of them said, trying to hide a smirk. Karen, however, wasn't amused. She stood there, arms crossed, insisting that Sarah was breaking some obscure HOA rule. The police left, confirming there was no violation, but Karen wasn't done. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath as she walked away. And it wasn't. Karen's campaign of harassment had only just begun. Karen's obsession with harassing Sarah was spiraling out of control. When the petty HOA violations and false police calls about unauthorized construction didn't break Sarah's spirit, Karen decided to up the ante. This time she dialed 911 with a new accusation. Sarah had threatened her with a menacing glare. Yes, you read that right. A glare. Karen claimed Sarah's intense and hostile stare made her fear for her safety. It was absurd, but Karen was determined to make Sarah's life miserable, no matter how ridiculous the accusations became. When the police arrived, Sarah was shocked to see a familiar face stepping out of the patrol car. It was her older brother, Officer Mike. He had been assigned to the call and immediately recognized his sister's address. As he approached the scene, Karen was already waiting, arms flailing as she dramatically recounted her version of events. "She looked at me with pure hatred," Karen exclaimed, pointing at Sarah. "I felt so unsafe." Mike listened patiently, his expression growing more skeptical by the second. He knew his sister well, calm, kind, and not the type to intimidate anyone, let alone with a look. After a quick conversation with Sarah, Mike turned to Karen, his tone firm but professional. "Ma'am, I've reviewed the situation and there's no evidence of any threat here," he said. "Filing false reports is a serious offense. I suggest you reconsider before this escalates further." Karen's face turned pale. For the first time, she realized she might have gone too far. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I'll be filing a complaint about your conduct," she snapped at Mike before storming off. Sarah sighed in relief, grateful for her brother's support. But as she watched Karen walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Karen had made a big mistake by involving the police, but her determination to ruin Sarah's life was far from extinguished. Karen wasn't done. If anything, her encounter with Officer Mike only fueled her determination to take Sarah down. She decided to take her fight to the court of public opinion, the neighborhood Facebook group. Late one evening, Karen posted a lengthy rant in the group titled "A Dangerous New Neighbor Among Us." In it, she painted Sarah as a menace to the community, accusing her of everything from defying HOA rules to creating a hostile environment. She ended the post with a call to action. "We need an emergency HOA meeting to address this. You threat before it's too late." The post immediately sparked a flurry of comments, but to Karen's surprise, the reactions weren't what she expected. Instead of rallying behind her, neighbors began sharing their own stories about Karen's relentless harassment. One person wrote, "Remember when you fined me $52 because my garden gnome was facing the wrong direction?" Another chimed in, "Or when you called the cops on my Halloween decorations because you said they were too scary." The comments kept pouring in. "You fined me for having a pink flamingo in my yard. You threatened to report me for excessive bird feeding. You even complained about the color of my Christmas lights." It turned out Karen had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years, and Sarah was just the latest victim. The more people spoke up, the more it became clear that Karen was the real problem. Sarah, who had been quietly watching the drama unfold, decided to chime in. She posted a simple message. "I just wanted to live in peace. I never expected to be targeted like this. Thank you to everyone who's standing up for what's right." The response was overwhelming. Neighbors flooded the thread with messages of support for Sarah and calls for Karen to step down from her self-appointed role as the HOA enforcer. Karen, realizing her plan had backfired, tried to defend herself. "I'm just trying to protect our community," she wrote, but no one was buying it. The tide had turned. Karen's reign of terror was coming to an end, and the neighborhood was finally ready to stand up to her. The emergency HOA meeting was packed. Neighbors who had never spoken up before showed up, determined to put an end to Karen's reign of terror. The room buzzed with tension as people shared their stories, one after another, about how Karen had made their lives miserable over the years. Sarah sat quietly, listening as her neighbors recounted their experiences. There was the elderly couple fined for having a too colorful garden, the single mum harassed for her kids' toys being left on the lawn, and even the retired teacher who was threatened with legal action for hosting a too noisy book club. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she kept it simple. "I just wanted to feel welcome here," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But instead, I've been targeted for things that don't even make sense. This isn't what a community should be." The room erupted in applause. It was clear where everyone stood. The HOA board, realizing the extent of Karen's abuse of power, called for a vote. One by one, the board members raised their hands in favor of removing Karen from her position. The decision was unanimous. Karen sat in stunned silence, her face turning red with a mix of anger and humiliation. "This is outrageous," she shouted, slamming her hands on the table. "You'll regret this." But no one was listening. The room erupted in cheers as the board officially announced Karen's removal. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community again. Karen stormed out of the meeting, muttering under her breath about how she wasn't done yet. But for now, she was powerless. No more fines, no more threats, no more harassment. The neighbors celebrated their victory, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't going to let this go. She had lost her position, but her thirst for revenge was far from quenched. The neighborhood had been peaceful since Karen's removal from the HOA board. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could finally relax, but that peace was shattered one night when she woke up to the sound of her dog barking furiously. She rushed to the window and gasped. Her front yard was a mess. Trash bins were overturned, garbage scattered everywhere. Her prized rose bushes had been spray-painted with ugly neon green streaks. And worst of all, dog food was strewn across the lawn, attracting every stray animal. In the area, Sarah's heart sank. She knew exactly who was behind this. The next morning, she reviewed the footage from her security cameras. Sure enough, at 2 a.m., a familiar figure appeared on the screen. Karen, dressed in all black and wearing a baseball cap, crept into the yard like a shadow. She spent nearly 20 minutes vandalizing the property, her face twisted with spite as she worked. Sarah didn't hesitate. She saved the footage and immediately sent it to her brother, Officer Mike. Within hours, Mike and another officer arrived at Karen's house. When Karen opened the door, her smug expression quickly turned to panic as Mike held up his phone, playing the damning video. "Care to explain this, Karen?" he asked, his tone stern. Karen stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but the evidence was undeniable. The officers issued her a formal warning and made it clear that any further incidents would result in criminal charges. As the police left, Karen stood in her doorway, seething with rage. But for the first time, she looked defeated. Her reign of terror was over, and the entire neighborhood knew it. Sarah shared the video in the neighborhood Facebook group, and the response was immediate. Neighbors flooded the comments with support for Sarah and outrage at Karen's actions. "This is the last straw," one neighbor wrote. "She needs to be held accountable." Karen's reputation was in ruins and her power was gone. But Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was truly the end, or if Karen had one last act of revenge up her sleeve. Karen's vandalism didn't go unpunished. The security camera footage was undeniable evidence, and the court didn't hesitate to slap her with a hefty fine for trespassing and property damage. The judge also issued a stern warning. "If you so much as step out of line again, you'll be looking at jail time." The verdict was the final nail in the coffin for Karen's reputation. The neighborhood had already turned against her, and now even the law had spoken. With no power, no allies, and no sympathy left, Karen had no choice but to pack up and leave. On the day she moved out, the entire neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Kids played outside without fear of being scolded for, laughing too loudly. Neighbors waved to each other without worrying about being reported for excessive friendliness. And Sarah, she finally felt at home. As Karen loaded the last box into her car, Sarah couldn't resist one final jab. "Leaving so soon?" she called out, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I guess the HOA rules don't apply to you anymore." Karen shot her a glare but said nothing. There was no comeback, no snarky remark, just bitter silence as she slammed the car door and drove away for good. With Karen gone, the neighborhood transformed. Block parties became a regular occurrence. Kids rode their bikes down the street without fear, and Sarah's rose bushes, now free of neon green paint, bloomed brighter than ever. It was a new beginning for everyone. Karen's reign of terror was over, and the neighborhood was finally free to thrive. Life lessons from Karen's story, a message for all ages. Karen's story is more than just a tale of neighborhood drama. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of community, fairness, and standing up for what's right. At its core, this story teaches us that no one should abuse power or use rules as a weapon to control others. Karen's downfall came not just from her actions, but from her inability to see the harm she caused. Her obsession with control blinded her to the value of kindness and respect, and in the end, it cost her everything. For older audiences, this story resonates deeply because it reflects the wisdom of experience. Life has likely taught you that true strength lies not in authority but in compassion. A community thrives when its members support one another, not when they tear each other down. Karen's failure to understand this led to her isolation, while the neighborhood's unity brought them peace and happiness. This story also reminds us that it's never too late to stand up against injustice. The neighbors who finally spoke out against Karen showed courage, proving that silence only empowers bullies. Whether it's in a neighborhood, a workplace, or a family, addressing unfair behavior is essential to maintaining harmony. Lastly, Karen's story teaches us about accountability. Her actions had consequences, and she was forced to face them. This is a universal truth. No matter how much power or influence someone has, they cannot escape the repercussions of their choices. In life, we all have the power to choose how we treat others. Let Karen's story be a reminder to lead with kindness, to stand up for fairness, and to build communities where everyone feels welcome. After all, a life well lived isn't measured by how much control we have, but by the positive impact we leave on those around us.